What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the channel. In today's episode, we got a brand new project, and as all our projects, it's a total piece of crap. Stick around and we'll see what we can do with this thing. Okay, so getting into it, all I can tell you about this bike is, well, pretty much nothing. So essentially where I got this bike was from a auto wrecker / towing company. Typically when that happens, you can kind of figure that the bike's either been stolen, been raced and pulled over by the cops, or somehow or another the law was involved. Now fortunately, I only paid $1,000 for it, and it came with the clean title, so that's definitely a good thing. But again, I don't know anything about the bike other than it looks like, well, the way it looks. So the very first thing I want to do is I want to walk around with you guys and show you everything wrong with this bike and see if we can get a feel for what this bike needs. Okay, so first thing I want to point out is I did put a different ignition plugged in real quick just to see if the bike would turn on, because it did, of course, not come with a key. And it's a total mess. Like I said, I've not done anything with it. I just wanted to see if it had any power, and it does not. So what we'll have to do is kind of figure that part out. But again, we're going to walk around it and figure out exactly what's been done to it. Now, I see a lot of zip ties, and then generally speaking, that's not a good thing. So the very first thing you'll see, the headlight shot, all the tabs are broken, and they've been zip tied and rigged to the front forks here. I can see a pretty sweet LED something there. Gauges are busted, but I think they might cycle on. I don't know, we'll see if we get power to it. It doesn't push very easy. These front brakes seem kind of locked up. It's been sitting outside for, well, probably over a year in the rain. So that's going to add to the funness that we got going here. I don't know what that is. It looks like LED lights or something. I don't know. Whatever. The rear sets seem to be in one piece, which is good. It does look like there was some bolts replaced at some point and probably some paint, which doesn't look great. I can see that the tires are absolutely shot. Factory exhaust was once maybe taken off and then the original put back on. I don't know. The scary part, I noticed right when I bought this thing, there's wires coming from everywhere, and the battery looks like it's either busted off or melted off. I don't know, not good. All the fairings are pretty much gone, and the ones that are left of it are totally shot. There's cracks, scrapes, grinds, and pretty much everything you can think of on this bike. It's pretty bad shape. As you can see, the chain is destroyed. Again, this thing's very tough to push. That's probably a culprit and involved in that. That's nice. I don't know what that's for, some kind of jumper of some sort. And yeah, overall, you can just see that there's wires everywhere that are cut. And, at first glance, I'm going to guess this thing was probably stolen at one point. And then somebody had it working. This, actually, any key can turn it, but it doesn't seem to work, so I'm not sure how that works. But this hasn't been dug out, so you think if it was stolen, it wasn't stolen very long. Or they had the key. I don't know. But that's kind of the bike itself. I don't know where to start with this thing. I think the first thing I want to do is I want to address all the wiring. But in order to get all that wiring fixed, I got to get all the junk off it, all the fairings, the lights, and all that junk, so I can get to the bare openings of this thing and figure out exactly what's been done to it, or attempted anyhow. So let's get into that. All right. To start, let's get rid of, I don't even know where to start, to be honest with you. There's so many. It's so bad. That's actually kind of hilarious if I'm being honest with you. Obviously he wasn't using that light. There's no bulbs in it. I'm not sure what the purpose of the light sitting there was. But you know what? I think this is going to take a minute. Let me cut all this off and I'll show you what it looks like when I get that crap out of the way. Okay, so that's much better after we got a lot of the junk off it. Now the next thing I gotta do is take that tank off. Now obviously I'm gonna be a lot more careful with the tank because it is not damaged and I wanna keep that in decent shape. Now one thing I didn't share with you, I thought was kind of odd that I told you I didn't know anything about the bike, but the one thing I actually do know about the bike is it is a 2007 Suzuki GSXR 750. So probably should lay that in line, even though it probably shows that in the thumbnail. Nonetheless, that's what the bike is. But right now, I'm just quit talking, I'm gonna get this tank off, and then all this wiring should be exposed and we could start patching up some of the issues and try to get power to this thing. Wow, now that that's finally over, I'm telling you, when somebody says a bike is clapped out, this is that, and then some, a lot more. I mean, I think the biggest, seriously, upgrade on this bike is the 40 pounds of zip ties I took off it for weight loss to make it faster. It's absolutely just dumbfounded. Lots of wiring, LED lights, all very unprofessionally done, cut into everything. It's absolutely ridiculous. However, I'm not going to sit here and bitch about it. As I told you, I'm going to put a new battery in it right now. I got to clean these terminals up. We'll get this new battery connected, and then we'll see if this thing turns on or does anything at all. Okay, so I got those terminals cleaned up the best I could and replaced it with a brand new battery. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with the terminals yet, just because they're in pretty bad shape. And if I'm being honest, the last thing you want to do on a bike is mess around with wiring and take a chance when you're out riding for it to get a loss of ground or a loss of power. It could ruin your day, and you could absolutely not know where the problem is coming from. Bike gets towed. I mean, just a whole bunch of negative attitude there that nobody really wants to have to deal with. Anyways, it's time for the reality. Either this was a really bad mistake or it doesn't do anything, or I don't know. So battery's in, keys connected. Let's see what happens on these gauges. All right, we got a sweep. That's good. All right, so we got the famous red light check. This could be a lot of different reasons. This could be bad wiring, a bunch of different things. Typically, that means that the ECU isn't sending any information to the actual gauges, or I don't have the switch on. That didn't make a difference. Well, it's in neutral, as we can see. It's not firing. Let me put the kickstand up real quick. Lean it up against me. Still nothing. So odds are what's going on with the bike, I would say right now, is either we have a mess of this wiring right here where there was a main connector that was been, whatever you want to call it, or there's a situation where we have a bad side kickstand switch, a bad kill switch. There's a lot of different things. I think the smartest thing for me to do right now, though, is probably patch all our wiring and make sure that all the plugs go where they're supposed to go. If that comes out correct, then either I have a short somewhere, a bad sensor, or a bad ECU. So let's move forward. Okay, so here's where we're at with the wiring, or I should say here's where I'm going to start with the wiring. A few things. The horn has been cut off and it was attached, I think, to their LED lights, which is kind of strange. Nonetheless, I'll get that connected with the horn layer later on. I don't know what the green and purple is. I'll have to figure that out. It's also coming out of the switch here, so I have to figure that out. And then again, to attack this, what I'm going to do, from what I can see, I don't see any duplicates. So I'm probably going to cut off an inch from this way and an inch from that way. I'm going to lose a couple inches overall. I'm hoping I still have clearance to my gauge cluster and everything else that needs to go to it. And get all those things reattached the way they're supposed to be. Now this wiring's pretty ratty. Again, it could really use a new harness, but again, to try to save the budget as best we can to make sure this is an affordable budget and a cool looking bike when it's all said and done, I'm gonna try to save that $300 to $400 if I can. So I'll try to repair it, and if I can't, then I'll have to buy one. But there's a couple other wires that are pretty much fried. You can kind of see the, if that'll focus, the headlight connector is pretty bad. And then there is a little switch here that is actually a pin. I'm assuming it came out of the gauge cluster. I don't really know. It's a black and blue. So that's not connected as well. So I'm going to get all these things connected, and then hopefully, after that goes right, there isn't too much wrong with the regulators you see here, because that's all gouged up and cut up too. So not good, obviously, but I'm going to do the best I can to get this working. Let me get it all patched up, and I'll show you what it looks like here in a second. Okay, so a little update of the wiring harness right now. The black with the blue pin that was sticking out, we didn't know what it went to. I was actually going to one of the turn signals. I popped it back in. I'll probably take some liquid tape at the bottoms, because you can see the wires are just kind of like, they stick out. I don't like that. So I'll repair that. That's not a big deal. But if you look at the mess that we had, it's all hidden in here. And I'll tell you how I do that. Now, because this is in a motorcycle that, you got wind and vibration and constant flexing of your wiring, I don't like to use the shrink connectors like these right here. And the reason why is because eventually what ends up happening is they end up basically cutting through, and you end up having a short and having problems. So what I use is one of the soldered type connectors, the butt connectors here. Now, I don't really trust these things completely either. They're nice because they're really thick plastic. I don't have to worry about them basically wearing out, at least anytime soon. And so what I do is I'll actually slide these down the wiring harness here, and then I'll go ahead and actually solder all the wires, and then I will slide this over top of it and then melt this. So for me, it works really well because it gives me a really good connection. I don't have to worry about it breaking apart, and then I end up sealing it with a melted or a heat shielded type sleeve. You'll see it right here. Now I'm about to wrap it with some electrical tape, and it should be good to go. Everything's booting up on our gauges. Again, I had a little bit of an issue where it didn't. It was a popped fuse, no big deal. But we still have the word check there, so we'll move into that in a second. But for now, I'm going to finish cleaning this wiring up here, and then we'll move forward. And so now with our wiring all cleaned up, it's time to move forward and take a look at why our dash still says check. Now there's a few different things that could be causing this, from a bad kill switch, to a bad neutral switch, to a bad kickstand switch, and a few other things. However, before I dive into that, I want to move forward and look at something that we purchased and put on, which is that right there, the ignition switch. Now, one thing I haven't checked yet is that these things a lot of times out of the box are faulty, and the reason that it is, Suzuki made a security measure when they started making the ignitions for these newer bikes, well, early 2000s newer bikes, and that was by putting a 100 ohm resistor inside the actual ignition itself. Now, many of these ignitions are rendered useless because they don't have that 100 ohm fuse. And so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to pull this thing off and take it apart and see if it has it. If it doesn't have it, it should be as simple as just simply taking one out of our original ignition switch and just swapping over the bottom of that. Let me show you how that's done. With our ignition now removed, I'm going to go ahead and take a Phillips screwdriver. I'm going to pull out these two lower bolts so I can access the insides. Carefully, after you get the two lower screws out, you're going to pop this lower pan out right here. If you look at this unit right here, you'll actually see it does have the resistor that's based from there to just here, and you'll see the little blue, if you can see that, the blue right there. So we do have the resistor. That's not a problem with our ignition. We can go ahead and put this back together. Okay, so now that we know that ignition is good, it's a good time to go ahead and pull out the original. Now, I can't show that on the video because it's essentially showing you how to steal a vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and pull the old one out, and I'll throw the new one back in. And with the new key now in, it's time to start checking other things. The very first thing I want to look at is our kill switch. Now, I went ahead and pulled the two lower screws out so I can get this thing opened up, just to make sure there's no moisture, like ants making a nest in there, because believe it or not, that actually is a common thing. It gets these things to stop working. And then what I went ahead and did is unplug it. Actually, the plug's right down here. And of like everything in this bike, it seems like the bike might have been in a flood because literally there's dirt all through every single connection. You can tell how corroded that is. Well, the camera's probably not going to focus, but it's really bad. But what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to flip the switch back and forth and look for continuity to see if it is working on this end. I'll see if I can get these things cleaned up and clean up the other side of the harness, and then double check that that's not the problem. We'll keep moving forward. So you'll see in the bottom right corners of your harness will be two orange wires. I've got ahead and put the probes inside there, and I put my multimeter on ohms. It's going to basically beep if I turn this switch. And what you'll see is that when I flip this switch, it starts to work and then cuts out. See that? Telling me that my switch is bad. Now, if I get consistent beeping, it'd be fine, but it doesn't. It starts to, like halfway. If I don't hold it, there you go. See how I'm holding it? Now it's working. So I'm gonna go ahead and plug this thing back in. I'm gonna put the ignition back on. We'll see what it does. All right, now keep in mind this might not be the only problem. However, what I'm going to do right now, I'm going to turn on the ignition key, and then I'm going to go ahead and see that it'll probably say check, and I'm going to fiddle with the switch real quick to see if the switch does anything different. Let's go ahead and turn this on. Still says check. Not getting anywhere yet. I don't know if that takes a second or not. So I'll go ahead and just unplug it and we'll go ahead and bypass it. Okay, so I was able to actually get the switch to work, and I also added a jumper pin right here where we were talking about the two orange wires, which essentially is putting that thing on, making sure that the engine can run, and it's still I'm getting a check. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to move forward and start looking at our kickstand safety switch. I don't think it's a neutral switch because the neutral light lights up so it knows when it's in neutral. Pretty sure that's going to be okay, but I want to go ahead and check that side stand switch first because I think from what I read, that's a pretty common problem. Okay, and so to check the side stand switch, essentially that wire runs from the bottom down there all the way up and into this green plug right here. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect this green plug, and that'll allow me to basically test this thing by putting the stand up and down to see if we're getting any kind of continuity. Now, it doesn't seem to want to release. I'm not going to force it, so let me go ahead and do that, and I'll show you what I come up with. And so the side stand switch seems to be working. It actually has a really high resistance. So just to be safe, I went ahead and put a jumper inside the other side of the harness right here. And I still don't get anything but a check. So it's time to move forward and look at something else. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is go ahead and take out the airbox. The reason why is I kind of want to potentially force jump start this thing. So essentially what I'll be doing is trying to turn that thing on and manually jumping the solenoid with some starter fluid to see if it'll still fire. That'll tell me if it's getting spark or not, or if it's just purely the ECM. Now there is a wire that runs from the ECM or ECU, which is the black with green tracer, and it runs all the way to the gauges. That's what gets the gauges going, but I don't know if that's the problem. There's also a connector you can see right there if it'll focus. It looks like a fan connector, but it doesn't go to the fan because that's on the other side of the fan. So I got to figure out what that goes to, and then hopefully, with everything accessible, we'll figure out what's going on with this thing. Okay, and this is the reason you pretty much rip everything down when you need to figure out what's going on with the bike, because you never know what's underlying. Now, what I did find, and I knew it happened sitting outside, was a rat's nest, not really a rat's nest, a mouse nest, and they made their way in those tiny little holes because they can get about anywhere. But that's not the important part. What you'll probably notice is that this wire is chewed off from there. And if you continue to look, you'll see this here and this right here, and a lot of different chew areas. So those are all areas that have to be repaired, but those could be the reason we're not getting signal. So just a thought. Right now, I'm going to go ahead and clean out that little nest. I'm going to go ahead and fix these wires for whatever I can see. We'll see if we have any update. Okay, so that thing's patched up. I went ahead and added some liquid tape right here because the wires weren't chewed through. It was just chewed to the wire onto those, and they were too short to actually splice in like this. And I didn't really like the idea of putting tape in there, so liquid, I think liquid rubber or liquid tape was a better idea, so that's what I did. As far as this thing, turns out this is for the actual horn, so I'm not sure what the other wires sticking out up front here are. I would have thought that went to the horn, so I got to figure that out. Not a big deal there. But you'll see we also have this right here. This is called the AIS, which technically speaking I think that is a Yamaha term, but that's an air injection system. That's going to be removed, but I don't want to take it out yet until we get this thing working. What I want to do right now is I want to spray some starting fluid in here and jump the solenoid just to get out of my mind the fact that it might not be the ECU, or it might actually be the ECU that's the problem. So let's go ahead and try that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the key on first. Still says check, whatever. Spray some starting fluid down these holes, and this probably won't do anything, but then we are going to jump the solenoid. Starter doesn't work? Nope. Yep, so there's definitely no fire. We can kind of rule out the fact that, well, nothing. It just doesn't work. Okay, so clearly that didn't work. That means that our ECU is definitely not communicating or not working at all whatsoever. What I need to do now is I need to get a hold of that pin I told you about earlier, the green with the, the black with the green tracer that runs all the way up to the gauges. I'm going to check one end at the gauge, one end back at the ECU, and we're going to see if it has continuity and make sure that it's getting connection and it's not been chewed through or something like that. Okay, so looking in the back, you'll see that I got one pin stuck into the ECU, which is right there. And then coming back to the gauge cluster itself, I have the black and green pin that you'll see right here, and it's getting continuity, so that means that the connection is good there. That's not the problem. The only thing I'm thinking right now is that this ECU might be bad because there's no way I can get communication. This shouldn't be a transponder key type bike because it's a United States bike. That's generally not a thing. But either way, even if it was, I'd have to get a different ECU. So that might be the option. Not a cheap option by any means. It's about half the cost of what I paid for the bike. So I'm kind of hoping that's not the situation. But let's move forward and see what else we can figure out. And as per usual, a little testing, and we found out that another thing is bad. Our starter relay / solenoid is bad as well. So I'm going to have to replace that. I'm going to do that. It's not a big deal, but I'm really not very happy with the wiring I had to do on the regulator, so I just bought one of those two. So we got that coming. We got that coming. You won't see a difference. We're going to slap those things on. We'll see if it makes a difference for us. Okay, and so now that we figured that part out, I went ahead and ordered a wire harness because I don't like this wire harness. I don't trust it. I don't want to be going down the road and have to worry about this thing cutting out on me. So I just ordered a new one. Well, technically speaking, used, but new to me. And it looks a lot cleaner. The connectors all look good, and so I'm going to swap it out. But before I swap that out, I want to go ahead and I want to pressure wash this thing because I don't care if water gets in these connectors because we're taking them out. And it'll give me a day or two for it to dry out before I get the new one on. Again, you guys won't see that difference, but that'll happen. So I'm going to go ahead and get this thing cleaned right now, and then we'll start ripping out this wire harness to swap out. And once again, moving forward, we have one more part to replace in the back, and that is this unit here. This is, again, your rear cowl, basically latch. And if you guys have a GSXR, you've probably dealt with the same problem because they all break. And you can get these fairly cheap online, but it's just going to break again. What I have here is a 3D printable version. I think it's like 99 cents on a website. I'll put a link in the description below. It's basically a heavy-duty version of this piece of junk right here, and you have it to print over and over and over if you ever need to, and it costs like $1.50 to print. So great deal. This thing works really well. It's very, very, very heavy-duty. You can yank on it and it won't break. It's in. Let's move forward. Now, moving forward, we're going to go ahead and change the oil because we don't know if this bike's been underwater or what happened with it, so that'll kind of tell the truth about the condition of the engine. We'll also probably look into checking the spark plugs after we get it fired over just to see what the history of the plugs look like. And this part's pretty straightforward. On the left-hand side of the bike, you'll see once you take out the fairings, there's a drain bolt right here. It is 17 millimeter. We're going to go ahead and use a socket like so. We're going to pull that out, and then we're going to see what comes out of this beast. Okay, and so as I start loosening this, I've already broke it free. If there's water in here, water will be the first thing that comes out, and clearly you'll see that it's clear or muddy. I'm going to let it drip just a little bit. Right now, that looks to be thick like oil, so that's good news. Yeah, no water in there. So far we're good. The next thing I look for is metal shavings, just in case there is internal engine issues. Right now I'm not seeing anything. However, once it's all done, we'll kind of take a look at the oil and see exactly what it looks like. Alright, so in looking at the oil actually looks really good. I don't see any metal shavings or any metallics at all whatsoever. No shimmering, no nothing. So it looks really good. Something to note, now while it looks dark brown right now in video, it's probably because it's got a black bullets in. However, pouring out, you can see through it and it was kind of a honey goldish brown. So I'm guessing that this oil change was not too long ago, and it looks like the bike was somewhat taken care of. So it's time to move forward now. We're going to go ahead and pull out that filter, and I'll show you what we use as replacements, and we should be good to go there. Alright, so to get this oil filter off, it is also a 17 millimeter. However, you'll be using a open-end wrench for this part here because a socket won't fit really well there. You could probably get a shorter one there, but it's just as easier, actually, if not easier, to use an open-end wrench. And here is our new filter. Now, I buy these in bulk off Amazon. I've had just as good a luck with these as I have with K&Ns. You guys can do what you want. If you guys are interested in buying these in bulk and getting these really, really cheap, I'll put a link in the description below, and it'll be available for you guys if you guys want them. Alright, so with the new oil filter on and about 3 quarts of 10W40, our oil window is showing a nice, clear, honey-looking oil. We're good to go. Alright, so now that we know the bottom half of the engine's good, it's time to go ahead and check the top half. And again, what I told you earlier is that I want to look at one of the spark plugs to see what kind of wear and what kind of condition the top end is in. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm disconnect one of these plugs right here. And I'm going to pull this coil out. It's going to take some work prying it out, or not, I guess. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull out that plug real quick, and I'll show you guys what it looks like. Alright, so this part's actually pretty easy, and this is all you have to use here. It's a 5/8 inch deep well socket. You got a short extension, and then I have a 1/2 inch adapter. The reason I use a 1/2 inch adapter is because I like to use a larger ratchet, and the reason I do that is there's less torque with more leverage with that larger ratchet, which means there's less chance of breaking off the socket. Now I'm going to set this down here. I'm going to grab a magnetic tool, and we're going to see what the truth is, if I can get this thing out with this spark plug here. And there it is. It's like fishing. Alright, well, that actually looks pretty darn good. They don't even look old. They're not even yellowed really around the base. So this bike's probably had somewhat of a recent tune-up before it was taken out of commission. And like I said, that's not real sooty. It looks like it's actually pretty clean. So I'll probably take them all out and clean them up anyways. I might just replace them, but these plugs are expensive. These things are like 20 bucks a piece. So if you don't have to replace them, I don't suggest it, but it never hurts to clean them out because we're going to test run the bike anyways, and then the tank will still be off. We'll be able to swap them out easy enough if we need to. And so moving on to the brakes, we know when we first got this bike, it was really hard to push. The brakes felt like they were stuck on the front, and the back brakes, I couldn't even push the lever down. So what I did was I went ahead and removed these 2 bolts right here. I pulled this off, and I loosened the bolt that this goes through, which is right here. Now it works perfectly fine. I didn't have to move it much, but obviously somebody that didn't know what they're doing had their hands in it. That's repaired. Problem was after that, I started leaking out fluid back here. I had to bleed it, put in new fluid, and of course there's moisture in it. We got that out. And then looking into it, what I realized that the pin that holds the pads was missing, and not only was it missing, the pads were missing. And so fortunately, because I couldn't find this pin locally with a decent time frame of getting it shipped, I had one out of a Ninja 250 or 300 or something like that, slightly larger, so I had to drill out this back piece here. Not a big deal, it fits perfect. I'll have to drill out that same hole in the actual pads themselves, but the pads are on the way. We're about to throw those in right now. Once we get those bled and everything's good, we'll move on to the front. All right, so the pads are finally in. Just a point to remember that these holes right here are going to be drilled out just like I drilled out this pin right here. And I'm gonna go ahead and throw it in. Should be okay, we'll find out. Moving on to the front brakes are actually really easy. All you have to do is remove these two bolts right here, which are a number 5 hex bolt, and then you'll have two 12mm bolts that come out right here. Once that happens, the pads will basically slide out. We'll slide the new ones in. These are actually what retain the pads to the caliper, and then we'll put the 2 bolts back in. This will happen obviously on both sides. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that another thing I need to do is I need to basically drain this fluid, because you can see it's pitch black. That's not good, so I'm going to go ahead and drain that, and this should leave our front brakes absolutely perfect. Wow, so you want to know why this bike didn't roll back and forth. These look to be the original pads, and they were wore down into the metal by about 2.5mm, completely gone. Wow, I think this just actually earned this bike a new nickname, the Clapper. Alright, so moving forward, I finally got the new to me used ECU and the replacement harness right there. We're going to go ahead and plug this ECU in, we're going to see what happens. Okay, so with the used ECU now plugged in, it's time for the moment of the truth. Let's see what happens to our gauge cluster when we turn this thing on. Okay, well we already have more lights than we did before. Alright, that's good. Doesn't say check, it said F1, so there is a code. But I don't know what's going on with that thing, it's freaking out. But nonetheless, I think we're in business. Now, just because that works doesn't mean that I'm leaving all this mess. I told you, I didn't like this harness. I don't like all the splices and cuts in it, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it and replace it with the one we just purchased to make sure we're still on game with that. Just before I throw on that harness, I wanted to go ahead and check what the code was, just in case that changes when we change the harness or something different changes with the ECU. So I went ahead and put a jumper right here. You'll see that's the bottom 2 pins. When this is facing this direction, this puts you in dealer mode. I already had the bike on, didn't do anything else. I just plugged that in, and you'll see here, it's giving me a code C28, so I have to go and check what that means. I'll be right back. So moving forward, what I read, the C28 code is actually for the secondary butterflies, which are right here. It's the actual controller module. Now, this could be this, it could be the actual computer itself. I don't really care because I delete these. And when I mean I delete these, I'll simply unplug this or leave it plugged in, it doesn't matter. And I'm going to take these small screws out right here and pull these butterflies out so it's not controllable, so I can get better overall airflow at higher RPM. So again, I don't really care about the code. I don't know what it is, and I don't really care. I'm moving forward. I'm pulling this harness out. We're going to put the new one in. Okay, and so with the new harness slung over right here, we're going to start at the very front. We're going to start unplugging each individual plug and plugging in our new harness. Now, I did go ahead and buy a brand new gauge cluster harness, which is, if you remember, the connector right there that was smashed and we had to completely wire together solid. Obviously, I can't connect that to the new one because there's a plug, so I bought a brand new one with a plug. So we'll start from the front, again, start pulling that thing back, and I'll show you what it looks like all said and done. Alright guys, finally, we got all the wiring back on, and it's time to do exactly what I proposed. We're going to go ahead and fire this up. Now the way that I'm going to do this, because I don't want to put gas in the tank, because the tank's got to get painted and had some work done to it, I'm going to use an external pump. And now, essentially this is just an old internal pump that I have converted with the switch that you'll see right there, an extra 12-volt battery that will run this thing. Now, it's not running off its own 12 volts, but it's all the same. I could check voltage at the plug right there and ensure that it works, and I'm assuming it will, but I will do that. Anyways, for now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to temporarily turn this thing on. This thing should take a second, then it's going to prime. And what will happen is you'll see these lines fill all up. Once they're full, then we'll attempt to basically fire this thing up. Okay, so it's primed. I do have an airlock bubble right here. I saw it shooting out right here, so I have to keep that in mind. But let's go ahead and turn this thing on. I want to go ahead and re-click this. Okay, so right now it looks like we're not really getting voltage to our fuel pump, which means we might not be getting spark as well. Right when I first turn the key on, it hits 12 volts and then it shuts right off. I'm going to spray some starter fluid. We're going to see if this thing actually fires. That'll tell us whether it's just a fuel pump issue or if we're getting spark or not without having to pull the plugs. Well, let's see what it does. Alright, so that tells us we're definitely not getting spark right now. Something's holding back. We got to figure out what that is. All right, I don't know if this is the problem, but it's a fairly obvious thing. I don't know how I missed it. So there's a plug sitting right there. I believe that goes to our throttle position sensor, which is hiding down in there. Let me plug that in and we'll try it again. Okay, well, no success after plugging that in. So what I did was I went ahead and put our jumper pin back in to get in dealer mode, and we had the C28, but now we also have a C23, and that basically means a tip over sensor, which is back here. And so I just need to kind of look at it and figure out what's going on with it and why it might be tripping. Seems to be plugged in. I don't know why that would be problematic, but it is definitely plugged in. And all the other plugs that are going to it, you see that are not plugged in like back there, I believe are all for turning signals and whatnot, so that shouldn't make a difference. I could be wrong on that, but I'll double check, but I need to figure out why this is giving us an error. Well, I think I found the reason we have an issue with our tip over sensor. Now, tip over sensor, just FYI, has kind of like a ball bearing in it, and anytime that ball bearing is not sitting flush at the bottom here, it makes contact and essentially will make this thing think that it shorted out of the bike slate over and it shuts off fuel. That's why the fuel pump is turning on and then cutting immediately off, and for obvious reasons you see why that's bad. Now, I'm assuming the person I bought this from didn't know this, but fortunately I do have another harness, so I'm just going to cut it off it. We'll splice it in like we have the others, make sure it's professionally done, and then that code should turn away or turn off, and we should be able to start this stupid thing. So now that's professionally sliced back in, if you want to call it professional, whatever, but it's done the right way. Even I don't like splicing, one's better than 100, so it is what it is. Let's get back on the dash, see if this thing gets rid of that C23. Ooh, hear that fuel pump? That's a good noise. I think we might be all right. Let's go ahead and try to fire this thing up. Well, we did something right. Fuel pump's still trying to pump out some gas. I don't want to keep this running too long like this with two different leaks, but C49, C28. I don't know what C49 is. We'll find out here in a second. Definitely hesitant. All right, let's shut it off. Well, good news, guys. It does run. It sounds pretty good. Like I said, it's hesitant a little bit. We'll figure out what C49 is, but we're making it through this battle. We're almost to the end. Okay, well, I guess this is my own fault. The plug right there that we took off for the AIS, or valve system they call it, is the reason it's popping that code. I didn't see that before. It's the only bike that's ever popped that code when I removed it, so I guess I'm going to probably have to put it back in. If that's okay, we're going to fire it back up. We're going to let it run a while, let it get completely warm. And once that happens, like I said, I'll start putting everything back together. We'll get this thing ready to go to the aftermarket side of things. Alright guys, so it was fully warmed up. I ran it to about 150 degrees. It ran great. No issues I could see other than a small amount of blue smoke at high rev. I think it's probably from sitting around for too long. We'll find out in the future, but I think it's going to be perfectly fine. You'll see we're at 12.9 volts sitting now with no power on. We were at 14.3 to 14.5 at full, and it was smooth all the way through when we were revving the bike and running the bike, so our charging system's doing what it's supposed to do, as it should, because we put a new regulator on when we installed a new wiring and ECU. So I think we're good here now. It's time to end this mechanical side. Alright guys, well that is a wrap on the mechanical side. It looks to me like we have a perfect riding bike with the exception of not actually riding it. Now I hope you guys join me on the next video, because next video is where all the fun is, and that's building and customizing the bike. Now don't be scared to hit that thumbs up, and more importantly, comment below what you guys think of the build so far that we call the Clapper. I'll see you guys in the next one.